On this episode of Clear the Air,
I've heard it said that parents do need to cut themselves a bit of a break because we're the first generations of parents in the entire history of humankind that have had to deal with this openness and insight into the intimacies of daily life. And there hasn't even been time to learn what the impacts of that are, right?
I don't want anybody that I know to have Snapchat, because in this paper they actually talked about the people who, and I believe it was Snapchat who started it. They actually went to a Stanford professor and a psychology professor, and they designed the app. They specifically designed the app to be addictive, and it's very addictive.
They gamify it. They gamify the interaction.
Absolutely.
Part of me thinks that puberty in and of itself is a mental illness, right? Like, you're completely rewiring the brain going through that stage. You're going from this process of me, individual survival to this idea of coexisting with others, and it requires the brain to totally rewire. And so you're going through this phase over several years where, you're thinking funny.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Clear the Air podcast. I'm your host, Nate Jones, and I'm here with Shad Slaughter today.
Hey, everyone.
I feel like it's been a little while since we've had you on an episode.
Yeah, I've been out for a few weeks.
Where have you been?
Well, was over in Finland, and
yes,
we missed
I think
you.
I was supposed to be there.
Yeah, what ended up happening? Why didn't you join us?
Because American Airlines. This is a shout out. Get your planes working. I actually cut my fall vacation at the lake with my family and friends. We've been doing this for 30 years. I cut that short by 2 days so that I could make it over to Finland. I came all the way back to Salt Lake. I left southern Utah in the morning, got all the way back here, hurrying, trying to get everything done. Got up to Salt Lake, got on the plane backed out, started taxiing, came back, and they're like, hey, can't get engine number 2 to turn on, so we're canceling this flight. So I missed all of the festivities and stayed here. They could have got me out there the next day, but I was only going over there for 4 days anyways. Right. And so to miss all the festivities and to really just get on the boat, I would have flown over there. I would have gotten there an hour before I was supposed to get on the boat. And I didn't know if I trusted the stuff that much, so I just canceled it. Plus, I hear you enjoyed my cabin.
Yeah, no, I was able to make sure that your cabin didn't go to waste. It was a little larger than the other cabins, but it was a good time. Your flight got canceled. Did you know that your dad's flight got canceled as well? Dr. Jones's canceled?
Yes, I know there was a lot of people that had flying issues.
And you were flying, just for the record, you were flying out of Utah, and Dr. Jones was flying out of Dallas.
Correct.
And you both had your flights canceled.
Correct.
So
and that's not the first time. I mean, I have flown millions of miles on American. I've been a loyal customer of theirs for going on 3 decades now. But yes, I've been an executive platinum. I've been flying with them for many years.
Yeah.
And even when I was going to take my kids and 2 of my nieces over to Ireland for spring break this year in April, I think you knew this. I think you heard the story. The same thing happened. We all got up to Salt Lake, and we didn't even get on the plane. The plane had mechanical issues, and we got up there. We're hanging out there for like 4 or 5 hours, and before they finally said, "Yeah, we're canceling the flight." And if they'd actually just said, "Chances are we're not going to have this plane," I could have gone to Delta, who I also fly a lot with. I could have gone somewhere. I could have gotten to Dallas and got that flight to Ireland, and that kind of just pissed me off. But the interesting part about that is my niece, who was flying from Albuquerque to meet us in Dallas, she also had mechanical issues.
Do you think that they're just trying to fly too many routes with too few planes?
No. I think that there's a general sense of malaise in a lot of things that's happening. I mean, I think you have malaise in politics. I think you have people just don't care. They have no motivation. I mean, this is my personal opinion, but I think there are a lot of people that they're not motivated to get out there and live their best life, be the best person that they can be. They're just like, whatever. Yeah, we'll do whatever. And that's just, that actually kind of leads into the whole thing that we're talking about today, which is parenting and stressors involved in parenting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of like that malaise angle on kind of infecting a lot of areas of.
Well, the reason why I'm bringing that up is the malaise, is as people just not, getting on the ball and getting things done as much, is because, as we're going to discuss this thing, this is a Surgeon General's report, and the reason why this actually concerns me is because it's pointing out all of the stressors and everything that is happening to parents, and I'm a parent. I have two daughters. One is 13, one is 11. Yesterday, my 13-year-old skipped school, and I had to go deal with that, and that was the first time she'd ever done that. Hopefully it's the last. But the reason why it concerns me is we learn from past history that when there is a Surgeon General report highlighting how bad a problem is, nothing ever gets done.
That's interesting. So what's the value of the report? Just
it makes them think that they're doing something. I mean, and I'm using this as an example. We've discussed it on this podcast before, the 2000 report of the Surgeon General looking at how, I think it was Surgeon General Satcher at the time, but looking at how oral care, the standard of oral care in the United States is declining. That was in 2000, and nothing was done to the point that during COVID, during 2021, Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, and Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General that helped write this, and one of the dentists, they came out and wrote another paper saying, hey, it's still going downhill. We need to spend more money on trying to fix the problem. Or we need to spend more money on research trying to figure out how to fix the problem rather than implementing any of the solutions that we already know about.
So you've obviously spent some time reading these reports that come out from the Surgeon General. Like, what do the reports look like? Is it just identifying an issue? Do they offer solutions? What does a Surgeon General's report look like?
Well, I haven't read all of them, but I have read a number of them, and they're different. I mean, the one on oral care, it pointed out the problem, pointed out that it's going down. It really was a very horribly written report. And the reason why I say that is because it would kind of like talking about pollution in the world without talking about forest fires. It's ridiculous because, in fact, I can't say forest fires. I'm trying to think what is the number one biggest thing in the world that pollutes. Because the whole report,
industrial emissions, is it industrial emissions?
Any of those,
Yeah.
But you go through that whole report from 2000, and at no point do they really dive in and say sugar.
Right.
Which I think any idiot, any fool, anybody knows and understands that sugar is what causes cavities. I mean, we learned that in kindergarten.
In that entire report, they didn't address sugar at all.
I counted out how many times they mentioned sugar, and it was in the single digits, 300 and something pages.
Right.
They talked about alcohol, they talked about drug use, they talked about meth, they talked about all kinds of stuff. They never really talked about sugar.
Why do you think that is?
Let's just
I guess
say
we talked about that in the
follow
podcast.
the money. Yeah, we did talk about it. But it really is who the political influence. It's the political influence that these lobbying groups have in our healthcare policies.
What I think one of the challenges that the Surgeon General and the government have if they want to take on these issues is there's this kind of push to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution. And I think that's probably one of the challenges is that if you try and apply a one-size-fits-all solution to 450 million people.
It's a good thing we don't have 450 million people then.
Yeah. Well, we do.
If you count Israel and Ukraine and Canada and Mexico.
Aren't we at 450 million people?
No,
Anyway.
we're 350.
350? Oh, okay. I stand corrected. Well, same point.
I know.
Coming up with a one-size-fits-all solution. And I think that one of the challenges then is it lends to a lot of criticism when people are saying, hey, look, like this doesn't seem to apply to me, or I have different circumstances or that. So I think it'd be interesting to kind of like go through some of the things in the advisory and, where these issues are stemming from. Because, there are a lot of reports out there that say that we live in a time of abundance. So the cost of a calorie is minimal. housing and while there's inflationary pressures and stuff, like the cost to survive is probably one of the lowest it's been, throughout history. And yet we're also living a time
I think I would disagree with you. I think that the cost of a calorie was probably cheaper in the time frame from 1950 to 2000.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's more expensive today, and not the cost of a calorie, the cost of existence, of survival.
Got it.
I guess, because the junk food is cheap, but the food that's healthy
Right.
isn't so cheap, and so the cost of a calorie, I think, it isn't what you should look at. It's the cost to survive in a good way, because you can go eat junk food. And you
Right.
can eat. I mean, you can go eat at McDonald's all day. Not to promote them, but give me some free breakfast burritos or whatever. But you can go to McDonald's or any of these breakfast joints and get enough calories to really last you the day.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're going to be not as healthy,
Sure.
and you're going to be paying more money in healthcare.
And I think it's a separate conversation, is like the quality of a calorie versus like the abundance of calories. But I think that you can inexpensively get very calorie rich foods, regardless of the quality, that will allow you to survive. Now, how long that survival lasts and like the ultimate impacts and how quickly you die or whatever. But so looking at this advisory, like what were some of the things that were pointed out in the advisory that is leading to, the title of it is Parents Under Pressure. What are some of the things that are leading to this pressure?
Well, they had a whole bunch of them. I mean, it comes from social media. That was a little one. One of them is schooling.
Are there any that stood out to you that?
Not that I really thought were big, bright things. I mean, this is all just, regular, typical parenting stuff that you would expect. But most of them were actually, surprisingly, issues that were instigated by our government.
What do you mean
and
by
that
that?
is cost of healthcare, cost of housing, cost of food. All of these things that really a family can go out and make money, but the cost of a lot of those things is a lot of times affected by government policies. And we know that in the last 20 years, we've had record inflation in this country, which is going up, and it's getting harder for people to pay stuff. The interest rates are going up. It's harder to get a house. It's harder to get this. People are having a harder time making ends meet. And that was what the number one stressor was.
Got it. So food and providing for your kids, a home, and some of the minimal creature comforts are starting to get outside of the ability of parents to provide that.
That's what I got from it.
Okay. Did they come up with solutions for it?
I didn't read any solutions, so I don't.
Throw me a bone here. All right. You mentioned social media. You said your daughter skipped out on school, not getting too personal, but you've got two kids, 13 and how old?
11.
11. I've got an 11, a 15, an 18, and a 20.
So I should be asking you for advice on parenting?
Well, I've been through a few things. I wouldn't say, it is interesting. I think that, I've heard it said that parents do need to cut themselves a bit of a break, because we're the first generations of parents in the entire history of humankind that have had to deal with this openness and insight into the intimacies of daily life. And there hasn't even been time to learn what the impacts of that are, right? And so it's like what kids are sharing on especially platforms where the content is erased, right? And so it's intentionally built to hide information from parents and hide information from caretakers. But
well, the government is a big fan of and supporter of that, as we know.
How so?
Well, because there's all kinds of states and school districts where kids can do stuff. I mean, you can talk about gender affirming, whether it's right or wrong, but all of that, there's a lot of schools and states where if the kid wants to do it, the schools will help them do it behind the parent's back.
So another stressor of parents is that typically social institutions that they've been able to rely on for kind of helping with the development of their child are now kind of trying to cut the parents out of that development.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big pressure. So you have social media, you have the kids dealing in a world, and it's fascinating. So in our family, no cell phones until you're 14.
See, I broke down and got mine when she was 13.
Yeah.
And she just got it taken away. And she won't get it back until she's at least 14. And I'm probably just going to get her a dumb phone with texting and a phone line.
Our 11-year-old, so he doesn't have a phone, but he has an old phone that's not connected to
Like a
a
little
service,
iPad.
right? Like a little iPad or whatever. And
What do they
and
call
we
those?
have
iTouch.
we have controls over what he can load on that. So in our house, you can't have any social media until your own social media account until you're 16 of any platform. That may sound draconian to some parents. Certainly, among my kids' friend group, they're one of the only ones that don't have social media.
So how do you police that?
There's apps that you can put. So Apple devices, we have parent.
But real phones,
We have
Samsung.
parent controls. I'm sure there's something on Android, but we have parent controls, and so we can set how much time that they use, and I'll get a request for more screen time, and it'll be specific to what they want to do. But some of it's just having the child understand that we have the right to log into their messaging and to their phones and see what's going on and look at their histories. Actually, our kids aren't allowed to have. We don't allow our kids to have Safari or web browsers on their mobile devices till they're 16 as well. And so some of that is due to helping guard against exposure to certain things before they're able to cope with it. And the other one is just this like technological draw of like, I can't be bored anymore. Like the feeling of boredom is so uncomfortable. They have to like get that dopamine response by logging onto something and having that interaction. And it's true because as an adult, I find myself in the same thing, right? There's times where I just have to like turn off my social media, take it off of my phone.
Well, there was a paper written on that, and I wish that I'd pulled it up for this, but I don't want anybody that I know to have Snapchat, because in this paper they actually talked about the people and I believe it was Snapchat who started it. They actually went to a Stanford professor and a psychology professor, and they designed the app. They specifically designed the app to be addictive. And it's very addictive. You have to have it. Is that the one where it says, you've had this streak going on, you guys have snapped every hour for the last 32 days,
Yeah.
Don't break your streak? Is that the same app?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
They gamify it. They gamify the interaction.
Absolutely. And it becomes, the other one that they do is Be Real. And, I'm out at the lake and my friends, their kids, be like, oh, Be Real time. We got to take a Be
Right.
Real.
I think you have 2 minutes to do it to get certain privileges or something like that. You get a second one if you do it within the 2-minute time frame.
Yeah. So it's just crazy.
And I think that, I think there's a lot of positives that come from these social media platforms.
You do?
Absolutely. I mean, I find a lot of connection to people. I mean, the way I use it generally is I find a lot of connection to people that I want to keep in contact with that, I don't necessarily pick up the phone and call and have a conversation with, but I'm interested in what's happening with their lives and gives me insights into what's going on.
Well, that's good to know that you're interested in other people.
So you got the pressure from the kids getting involved with it. When you were saying the flip phone, my 11-year-old was figuring out, and this is the one thing is that kids are way more capable of stuff than we give them credit for, right? Especially when it comes to technology, that they've been raised with this technology. So my 11-year-old found out how to get around these parent controls on his phone. So the app needs to work a little bit harder because kids are savvy and smart. So he figured out how to get around these controls, and he kept getting around the controls. And because we were doing physical checks of his phone, we realized this. And so we're like, okay, like we're going to get you a flip phone. And he was super excited. Oh yeah, I want a flip phone. Like, right. And we're like, okay, like we're really going to do it. He's like, yeah, I want one. Yeah. And this is the one I want. And he showed us one of those Samsung phones that folds, right? It's like, no. This is a flip phone, son. And, it's got a 5-megapixel camera and snake on it. And that's all you got, right? You can text and you can make emergency calls. But
you have to text.
He didn't want it. He didn't want it as much as that at that point. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. I think that's what my daughter's going to get.
Yeah.
When I told her that, she about had a conniption.
So
she was okay with
it.
This is what was surprising is she agreed to not to be grounded from her phone for a month. And I just said, well, I'll just get you a flip phone. And at that point, she got mad.
So she'd rather go a month knowing that she's going to get that engagement back versus getting a flip phone.
I asked her, I mean, kids, where your kids are going to school, you have one that's 13-ish.
Yeah, 15.
How many kids in junior high have smartphones? What percentage of them?
Huge percentage. So my 15-year-old, he's in high school now, but I have a son that just went into junior high school. And and that's just it, is that there's also that feeling of being left out, right? Where he'll go sit at lunch and he doesn't have his phone. He can't use his phone, or he can't use his tablet or whatever, his little iPod Touch or whatever, at lunch, and because we have it locked down, and the other kids are just on their phones during lunch, right? And so all this, like, lunch was like, I remember as a kid, junior high school especially, lunch was sacred, right? Lunch was that time you get to go, like, sit at the table. There's a lot of, like, social
But you actually went to lunch. We just went outside and played.
Yeah, you either sit at a table. Well, in the snow, we went inside.
Okay, let me really explain
did a lot of
that,
frisbee
because I didn't
and
go to
hacky
junior
sack
high.
when it was nicer outside.
I didn't go to junior high. My parents kept me out.
But that was where you caught up with everybody, was at lunch, right? That's where
now
you
they're
interacted.
catching up with everybody like this.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like what you just said. You keep up with your friends on social media.
They're
not by
texting each
calling
other
them.
across the table.
Yes.
You know, and it is one of those things where it's like, I don't want to, like, fall into that, this generation, right? It's always the older generation, like, impugning the newer generation. But I think that there are, if we look at the instances of mental illness and mental distress with kids these days, from what I understand, it's never been higher. Now, part of that could be that we're more sensitive to it and we're identifying and treating those things at a much higher rate than we were before. But I think that there is a lot of that comes from social media. So you have it for the kids, and then you also have the pressures of social media for the parents.
You go to social media to learn how to be a parent?
Well, and that's just it. You don't have a very, you're not super engaged with social media, and
not at all.
I applaud you for that. I try to restrict my engagement, but there are a lot of people that are turning to social media for parenting advice, and they're following influencers that give a very small window into their life, but like to present that window as what they're doing. And so it's like, oh my gosh, look at this mom. She's making lunch with little notes and cutting out the bread, the peanut butter sandwich into hearts, and she's putting all this effort into it. And it's like, okay, without social media without social media and the engagement and the catharsis that comes from people liking and making content, is the mom actually doing that? Is she doing it for her child, or is it a show for her kid?
Some of that, and
did your mom put notes in your lunches and
no,
cut your stuff into shapes?
Never.
Yeah,
so when I grew up in Idaho, this is actually it's a funny story that I'd like to tell. Have you ever been to my house in Idaho?
Yeah.
Did I show you
St.
the burn
Anthony?
mark over the stove?
No, I thought they redid everything there.
Okay, so they did redo it, and so I was wondering if, but they only redid it, a couple of years ago. So you obviously went there after that, but this was a brand new house. My parents built it, and we moved into it when I was, I want to say 6 or 7 maybe.
Yeah.
I know that I was 8 when I was in there, but my parents, with 14 kids, we would always go and say, hey, we're hungry, we want breakfast. And they'd go cook something. So me as a young child, I go upstairs and I'm making pancakes. Have you heard this story?
No.
So I go upstairs and I'm making pancakes. And, we had to grind the wheat to make the flour.
Yeah.
So we had that. Then we put powdered milk, and then we put the salt and the pepper and all this. And you put oil into the mix, but I was melting butter. So I put a cube of butter on the stove in a plastic measuring cup. And obviously it melted and caught on fire and burned the cabinets. And those cabinets were left there burned
for
30
decades.
years. They were there for 30 years. And every time we'd go up there, I'd be like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
But that was a completely different style of parenting, because my kids are 11 and 13. And
Do
maybe
you
it's,
write your kids' notes in their lunches?
no,
Okay.
no. In fact, I give them a bag of fruit, and sometimes I'll make them a peanut butter and jam sandwich.
Right.
Natalie, who is 11, she'll take fruit because she'll say, "Hey, I'm going to eat in the cafeteria today." And then she comes home and goes, "Yeah, I'm hungry, but I didn't go to the cafeteria to eat lunch." And I said, "Why not?" And she goes, "Because I don't like their food." My kids are, I cook for them a lot,
Yeah.
and I like to think that I'm a good cook, but they don't like. They don't even like going out to dinner.
Yeah.
I'll be like, "Where do you guys want to go out to dinner?" "Nah, just go home and cook something, Dad." So,
And that's good, right? That's like, I think that there's a lot of drive. You hear the term helicopter parenting. Now there's this new craze called gentle parenting. You have all this like parenting stuff going on social media. And what seems to be the common thread with all of that is the emphasis is on the parent, not on the child, right? The emphasis is on how does the parent feel the child feels about them. Does the kid like them? Are they friends with the kid? Like all of that versus like actually developing a good self-actualized and self-sustaining person that can go contribute to society. And I was thinking the other day, my son, school just started again. So my son, who's in junior high school, now he has to go to school about a half hour earlier than he was going to elementary, right? And my wife, for the first few weeks, has been there, like getting him ready, seeing him off, and everything. And literally, for the first 2 weeks, he was late every day to meet his friend group to go to school. And then one morning, I convinced my wife, "Hey, let's go mountain biking before school." And she's like, "Okay, we got to be back at a certain time." But we're having a fun ride. We ended up staying longer. We go down. And as we're driving down, we get a text from one of the moms saying, "Hey, it was great. The crew was here to meet all the friends this time." So the one time he was on time is when he wasn't being parented, when it was just like, "Look, you know what you got to do.
So you're saying
you know
you're
where you
bad
got to
parents.
be." No, I'm saying I learned from that sometimes we overparent, right? And it goes to this, like, I was reading this cool story about this kid in the Arctic who's 9 years old who hunted and killed and collected a narwhal whale for his family and his village to eat, right? He's 9 years old. He's 9 years old. Like the thought of a 9-year-old doing that. And so, I think one of the things is that the kids are way more capable of doing stuff than we allow them to do as parents because we're so focused on being a parent and what the parent is getting out of it versus how can I stretch my child? How can I make my kid, in some cases, uncomfortable, right? How do I make my kid resilient? I love that word for children is like resilient.
I think resilience and motivation are two of the best things you can teach a child.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a, that malaise that we were discussing earlier
Right.
is it's not really a malaise. It's just a lack of motivation to be a better person.
Yeah. We were talking about Finland a bit ago. So I was able, my daughter actually she's just turned 20 and she'd been living in Finland and came home for 5 days. And I decided to take her back with me for this business trip. And it was so gratifying, again, all about the parent in this case, but it was so gratifying to just see her as an adult in a foreign country engaging without any kind of like parental advice. Like she thrived over there, and we're across the ocean for 18 months, and she's there with.
I'm a little disappointed you didn't go visit her during that 18 months.
well, I think it's great because that separation allowed her to understand what she's capable of. And at one point we were doing some work on Sunday, and she said, "Hey, I want to go to church, and it's a ways away. I'm going to have to take a train and a bus and do some walking." And all of a sudden I was like, "Oh man, I feel like I need to go to her." And I was like, "Wait, stop. She's been doing this for a year and a half by herself. Like she doesn't need me to hold her hand on it." And so I think that's like, sometimes we have to put ourselves in check as parents and not
You trying to tell me I
overparent.
should just let my daughter skip school?
Well, I don't know about skip school, but walking down to when they come into work, sometimes they walk down to the Maverick down the street and buy their own treats, and that's acting like an
I let
adult.
both of my daughters drive my boat when I'm,
See, there you
skiing or
go.
surfing behind
Yeah.
it. The only time it's become an issue is when Sophia, the older one, has friends in the
She's
boat.
distracted.
Oh yeah, and she'll be like driving the boat and not paying attention at all to where you are, and you start getting a little concerned when this boat's. So I don't let her drive
Yeah.
when she has friends in the boat.
We have, my brother-in-law has a place up in Idaho, and his brother-in-law, they live next to him, and his brother-in-law has a big cattle ranch up there. And I got to meet his brother-in-law's kids, two young boys, and it was so fun to watch them. They're out herding the sheep and wrangling the cows, and I mean they just have this routine, and things that you would think that like was specifically for adults to do, they were out there doing it without a second thought.
Well, I just want to point out that when I was a kid, we had lived on a farm, and I had to go out and wrangle the rabbits.
Wrangle the rabbits?
Yeah, we had hundreds of rabbits, and
Yeah.
we had to go out there and wrangle with them. And
I saw a rabbit boxing a guy once.
I never saw that. We would have just grabbed its ears. Yeah, no, we. I mean, that's we had rabbits. And I found out after the fact. I think I've told you this. We had hundreds of them. And my parents like, well, we're going to raise them. We're going to sell the meat. We're going to sell the skins. And we never did. And I learned later, my parents acknowledged and admitted that the whole reason we had all these rabbits was to give us 14 kids something to do. So every day we had to go out and water and feed, 600 rabbits. We had to go out.
Then the next year it was 1,200. The next year it was 2,400.
It was ridiculous. But we had to go out and water these rabbits and feed these rabbits. And every Saturday we had to go clean all the crap out. And I mean, we had piles and piles, and then we had to spread it out over the grain fields. And
So I have a question. So did you like doing it?
no, I hated it.
Did that matter?
What do you mean?
I mean, are you better off for having done it?
No,
You don't think so?
no.
Why?
But I'm about to go buy a bunch for my kids to take care of.
Then you obviously thought you were better off. You
No,
learned,
but it
you
takes-
learned something from it, right?
I don't know that I did, simply because, it's a different time and a different place. I had to do it, but if I hadn't been doing that, I would have been off with my brother playing and doing something. Because we didn't live in the city. We didn't live in, the town. We didn't even live in a town. I mean, our closest neighbor was like a mile away. But we would always go out and, ride horses. We would always
Sure.
go find something to do. Today, and especially living in a community, of 100,000, 200,000 people, my kids just can't go out and get on a horse and go ride. They can't just go out and go lay on the pond. I mean, there is a pool they can go lay out at, but there's other people there that'll get them into trouble too. So I don't know that I learned
Really?
much from that. I might have.
I was gonna say when I was a kid, I had a paper route, and the money for the paper route that I made from the paper route didn't even scratch the surface of how bad that paper route sucked. Like, I hated every second of it. Waking up so early, we had to fold the papers and put the elastics around them. Then we had to go, and then not only
Who's
that,
we?
my friend did it. So we shared the route, and then sometimes we would, if one of us was gone, then we'd have someone cover. We'd do it together. My brother would help out sometimes.
And how much did you get paid for each paper?
Oh, pennies. And we only got paid. We had to do the collection too. So we had to go up to the houses and collect the money as well.
Did anybody ever come after you and get your $2?
Yeah, I want my $2. That was me going after them.
My
But-
$2.
Waking up, especially in the winter when it's freezing cold outside, it's pitch black. And I know that, like, when I get done, I'm not going back into a warm bed. I'm getting my clothes on and going to school. Doing the process of wandering the neighborhood when it's pitch black and throwing the papers on there, and then having to go and knock on doors and collect money for the thing. Like, I hated everything about it. But what it taught me was sometimes life involves things you don't like doing, and you just got to do them anyway. Right? I still got up and I did the paper route. I still went around and I did the collection.
Cleaned out the rabbit crap.
Right?
I still got up.
So you learned something from it.
Well, what I did learn was anatomy.
Did you never ate any of the rabbits?
My mom and dad tried to, and where it came down to it is they killed the rabbit and we, skinned it and cooked it and ate it. And as we're eating dinner, they're like, "Hey, this is Putzi." Because that was the rabbit's name. And after that, none of us would ever eat the rabbits
you
again.
can't humanize your food.
Well, okay, but we did.
Here comes a little Putzi.
But and we bottled it. We canned it in the quart jugs.
Yeah.
My mom cooked it and bottled it so we could eat it.
Yeah.
And to humanize it,
She put
the
pussy on the
name.
name?
She put the name of the rabbit on the bottle.
How many bottles does a rabbit fill? Like 2?
I don't know, dude. I was 10 years old.
That is pretty funny.
So, but anyways, the end of it is, back in the 70s and 80s, you heard about all these rabbit issues they had up in Idaho. I'm sure that ours weren't the cause, but we just turned them all loose.
You're just like, we're done with rabbits.
Done with the
open
rabbits.
the cage.
Just open them. Just go.
Oh man!
And we kept
you might get a phone call.
We kept telling.
They've like, we've solved the great rabbit expansion of 1980.
Yeah, but it was a lot. Well, no, it would have been in 80, late 80, 81, 82 when this happened.
Yeah.
But they
were eating all of the farmers.
Oh yeah, they were eating haystacks. They used to go out and have rabbit drives where they had to go beat them because they were going in and eating the haystacks, and the haystacks would then topple over and ruin. But they topple over on top of all the rabbits and kill them and squish them, and then all the hay would be rotten, and then it would rain on it. And so they had all these farmers out there getting rid of them. Sorry, guys. I was a kid. Statute of limitations is up.
Talk to my parents.
So, anyways.
I always find it interesting that when you, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but when you prepare a rabbit or any other animal for consumption, you're calling it dressing, right? We're going to dress the rabbit.
Yeah.
And yet you're taking its
dressing.
Skin off.
Yeah, dressing is when you take the skin off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that the opposite? Undressing a rabbit? Anyway. I wonder what the British call it.
There's a lot of things that we call it something, but it's the opposite. Like, in Congress we have bills that get passed, and the bill actually says exactly the opposite of what it does.
Yeah.
It's like we're dressing the rabbit. It's like we're having the Inflation Reduction Act.
We're
having the
inflation.
Affordable Care Act.
Which is going to make it less affordable.
Pretty much. I think I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
I'm waiting for someone to come out and say, Tyranny America bill.
The anti-tyranny bill?
No, the tyranny bill. Because if it's the tyranny bill,
it's the anti-tyranny
all about
bill.
freedom. I mean, the Patriot Act, there's nothing patriotic about it. It's about collecting our information and the government spying on its own citizens. So going back to this, we did go off topic quite a bit, but we're talking about some of the stressors for parents, and the biggest one was actually the financial stress of raising children. But here are some stats of what we really wanted to do, and I'll read some, and then we can opine on them, and you can give us some sage advice from a parent of more parental experience than I have. But over the past decade, parents have been consistently more likely to report experiencing high levels of stress compared to other adults. In 2023, 33% of parents reported high levels of stress in the past month compared to 20% of other adults. So roughly 50% more. I don't really feel like I get stressed. I don't feel like my kids stress me.
I don't think it's talking about the kids causing the stress. I think it's talking about
they're just stressed about being able to do their job.
Yeah, they're like, okay, it's one thing to feed and house and support one individual. And, I've got 6 kids and my wife's stay-at-home mom. And so it's my income. And so I've felt that stress at times going, how do I stretch the dollars to cover 6 mouths, right? And I was fortunate. We purchased our home in the early 2000s before the big jumps in housing prices and
Here in Utah.
Yeah. And got in at a very good interest rate. And so I recognize that I've been fortunate that way. And yet, even with that, like, there are some times where it's just like, okay, like, with all the needs and everything I need to do as a parent with 4 kids, am I providing what I need to be providing to them? And I think that the answer always comes down to, like, I think that sometimes there's that stress that comes from, like, the actual needs of a child surviving. And then there's the stress that comes from, all of the social pressure of my kid needs to, have the best clothes or, drive a car to school or all of those other things that really, I think that.
So what car do your children drive to school?
So we have a car for the kids to drive, and that's mostly for me because now I can send them to drive
Those are
each other. So
24 Yukon.
No, So one of the things I wanted all of my kids to learn how to drive a manual transmission. So we have a manual transmission Subaru, so they all have to learn how to. And we got the Subaru because we like the idea of all-wheel drive because we live in a place with bad roads in the winter, so there was a safety component to it. Here's why I like the manual for kids, right? First of all, it teaches them how to drive a manual, which I think is a cool skill, especially if you plan on traveling to Europe or something when you're older. The second is I think that it's harder to be distracted driving a manual. You have to be more, you can't be texting and doing other things. And so I think it's more engaging. And the third, none of their friends can drive the car.
That's actually a great idea. I think
So
I think I'm getting a manual.
yeah. And I'll tell you what though,
the
first 6 months is tears. Like maybe not 6 months, but when my daughter, when we brought the car home for her to drive, because she had been driving one of our extra cars that was automatic, and we sold that and we bought this. It was like a 2007 Outback for like $5,000, and it was a manual. And she got in, and yeah, it didn't. She was not happy. It was a struggle. But now she wears that experience, and she wears the fact that she can drive a manual as a badge of pride. And she's like, Dad, it's so funny when people find out I can drive a manual transmission, like they just think I'm amazing.
How is it even that hard?
Well, we live on, like, the high school is
On a hill?
we're on the hill above the high school, and it's a pretty significant hill, the most direct way home, and there's a stoplight and there's no flat spot to like stop on. And so to come home directly from school, they're on a really significant grade.
Really,
and
that steep?
Maybe not that, like that. I don't know. It's pretty steep. So what happened is for the first several months when she was learning to drive it, she would go on this huge long loop to get home where she wouldn't get stuck on a hill, stopped, and have to go into, first gear and roll backwards. I taught her the emergency brake method, but
I taught my nieces, my two oldest nieces, we were over in Europe, I taught them how to drive in Italy in a rental car.
Was it manual transmission?
Yeah. Yeah, I was out teaching this is actually a shout out to Land Rover. My car died. Come to find out, these newfangled cars, you can't leave the key in them or the battery will drain.
Oh, because it thinks that it has some of the auxiliary stuff on.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But they should know that, hey, after 10 minutes, turn it off.
Yeah.
But no, I left.
Because anybody that's bike clear, if you ever come out here, Nate's keys are in his car. In the parking lot.
Don't worry, they're in the park. They're in my car in the garage. But
it's the nice one next to the entrance.
But it doesn't matter because all of these cars come with apps now.
Yeah.
And you can know where the car is. You can turn the car off.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. You can report it stolen from your phone, and it'll disable the car. So, anyways, when they came in, it's in my garage. And I called them and I said, hey, can I come and get a battery to jumpstart this? No, we have to send out a tow truck. I'm like, what? I said, I'll just buy the battery and then you guys can take it back. No, I'll get a tow truck. So they gave me, but their customer service was deplorable. And I got so frustrated with it but they got me a loaner car.
Yeah.
And I took Sophia out driving it.
She did a good job?
We just drove around church parking lots, little neighborhoods, and, other than hitting a couple of balls that kids were chasing. I told her hit the ball, not the kid.
Yeah. It's a good choice.
No, but, I got to teach 13 years old how to drive.
Well, my 15-year-old just got his permit, and he's been the most confident so far, because he's had the most experience. Like I said, up on my brother's ranch, they're in side-by-sides and stuff driving around. And so for the first 6 months, he'll kind of... And he wants to drive all the time. Anytime we go anywhere, I want to drive. So first 6 months is just getting used to the rules, the road, and everything like that. And then we'll start 6 months into it. We'll start throwing the manual transmission in there and teach him how to drive that, so he's ready when he's 16. But yeah.
So what kind of things are stressing you as a parent? Because I'm going to come back to this because this is actually surprising. They say that 1 in 4 U.S. parents have been times in the past year, so not in their life, but every year. 1 in 4 people in the U.S. doesn't have enough money to feed their kids.
Yeah, that's a crazy statistic.
So that to me is
a concerning one.
Well, it is a concerning one.
I can't imagine. Again, I've been incredibly fortunate there were a few years when I was working on starting a company where it was pay the employees or pay myself. And so I would go without a paycheck for sometimes several months. And I had one kid, and I remember very sleepless nights, wondering which bill I was going to not pay in order to buy food. Right. So I've experienced it a little bit, and yeah, it's not comfortable.
I've had those same issues, but not really feeding kids. But when you're starting a company, who do you pay? Do you pay the employees, or do you pay, I was living in my mom's basement until we started getting going. But, so my company was going well before I ever had kids. So
I think the biggest concern with that is I think that if that statistic is a static statistic, meaning it's the same group of people that are feeling that year in and year out, year in and year out, that's a big issue, right? There is some benefit of going through that pressure, just from a gratitude standpoint, understanding what it's like, driving for success and stuff. So if most of that statistic is transitory, right, where you've got young college couples that are paying for school, they have a kid, and man, money is tight, but then all of a sudden you learn like the value of money, you learn the value of work, you learn those values. That's good. If that's a static number where it's just this same group of people feeling that year in and year out, I can't imagine being in that situation.
I'd actually really like to see some data. I mean, this goes on another tangent, which we've been doing all day. I'd really like to see some data on how many calories or the quality of calories that they're counting, because our food pyramid, and I think we're going to do a podcast on that in the near future, but our public health agencies, they tell us, 2,500 calories a day, 2,000 calories a day. But they have all these, there's a bunch of data out there. There's a bunch of studies out there that show that 1,000 calories a day is enough.
Sure.
I mean, so why is it that our FDA, not our FDA, but the USDA and our NIH, why is it that they want us to eat twice as many calories as what we need? And I think that's a question that needs to be looked at. And are these people that can't afford to buy food, are they buying the wrong food? I mean,
sure.
I would like to see some more data on what they're saying here in this.
I think it's a good point. Like even at work, we'll have, around lunchtime, we'll have Uber Eats or some of those pull up and bring, right now, a $9 or $10 meal at, McDonald's, and they're paying $3-4 on top of that for that. So now you're at a $15 fast food lunch. And it's like, look, like I understand that like rice and beans is not like the most exciting meal and eating that day in and out, but there's much of the world that eats rice and beans. And there are certain times in life where it's just like, look, maybe our expectations of what we consume is the problem, and we just need to like go into budget phase where we eat rice and beans.
I just wrote something down about this rice and beans. This is actually a funny story, but I had a roommate back when I was in college, and I was living in an apartment complex here in Provo, Utah, and my roommate came over, and he was, a little bit younger than me. He was probably 18, 19. And he was so excited. He was just moved out of his parents' house. Yeah. He was so excited. And he really had no life skills. But he goes over to the hamburger joint across the street. It's called, it's still there, Burger Supreme.
Yeah.
But he goes there and he gets a job. And, we knew the people there because we went there to eat a fair amount. So we said, yeah, go over there and apply and get a job. So he comes out, and he is dressed in spandex shorts and a tank top. And he goes over to Burger Supreme after he'd gotten a job. Yeah. And that's what he showed up to work in. So obviously they can't. They're like, no, that's unacceptable. You're not going to come over here and work at the counter in Burger Supreme wearing spandex shorts and a tight tank top. And so he came back and he was all depressed, and he goes, well, I think I don't have any money for food. And, and I said, well, what are you going to do? We'll see if we can get a job. We'll see what we can do to help you. And he goes, I'm going to have to sell. And I said, well, if you're going to sell something, what are you going to sell? And he goes through, and I can't remember what it was, but he goes, I'm going to sell my bike, which, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, if I didn't have money and I didn't have a job, the bike would be the last thing, because that's your transportation to get to your job. But he comes back and he's like, no, I'm going to sell my bike, and I can't remember what else there was, but the only thing he wouldn't sell, which he could have gotten the most money for, was his cassette and DVD collection and his radio. And he even had one of our roommates offer to buy it from him, and give him the cash. It would stay in the apartment,
right?
And if he ever paid him back, he goes, no, I can't sell my tunes. I can't sell my tunes. So he goes and puts his bike out sells his bike. Now he needs me to give him a ride over to the grocery store, and he's got like $50 until he's destitute, I guess. And this is where it gets funny: is he goes into the store and he buys Lucky Charms and Fruit Loops and Doritos.
Yeah.
And he comes up to the counter, and I just said, dude, if you're buying that stuff, then you can walk home.
Right.
And he got all mad at me for telling him what to do. I said, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm not going to participate in this kind of stupidity.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, what would you think I should buy? And I went back and I got him a big bag of rice and a big bag of beans and a bunch of cans of chicken and beef.
Yeah.
And he had enough right there, enough food to live for 2 months.
Yeah.
And if he bought chips and all the processed and the junk food, that would have been gone in a week.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a funny story.
But there's a lot that comes with that, and people may say, well, Shad, it's easy for you to say. You've never had to do it. I lived for 2 years on rice, cabbage, potatoes, and Argentina canned corned beef and eggs. That was like...
You say that like it's bad.
and ramen packets.
You say
no,
it
was
like
actually
Argentinian
really...
corned beef. I had spent a couple of years in Argentina.
Yeah, it was
and they have
great. I wish they had it here. So. I look for all the canned corned beef here has the potato in there too. So it's like the hash. The strips of corned beef in the can from the Argentina stuff was greatest. But yeah, for 2 years it was rice in the morning with some eggs mixed in. Usually we'd take the leftover rice from the night before, throw in some soy sauce, throw in a little bit of ham or corned beef or whatever, and mix it up as fried rice. Fried rice for breakfast.
I think I'm making that.
We do cans of tuna fish. They had the flavored tuna fish. I lived in the Philippines for 2 years with flavored tuna fish. Open a can of tuna fish, eat it with the rice for dinner.
Nasty.
For dinner, we'd have rice.
Can we get off another topic?
And cabbage.
Dude.
And actually,
you're
it was
making
really
me nauseous.
Good, but it was extremely inexpensive.
Okay, well, you're making me nauseous talking about
you don't
tuna
like fish. Huh?
No, I don't.
I got some up in the office.
Good. I'm out of here. So, anyways,
tuna fish.
a lot of things in here and statistics that are showing that it's getting harder to be a parent.
Right.
And I think that parents need to really just reclaim their parenting authority, their parenting rights from the state and actually be parents. And I know it's hard, but you have to choose, and this is my opinion, and I didn't have kids until after I was well established, and since I've had kids, I haven't really had any financial issues where my kids or even myself have been wanting. But growing up, I was going through that as a child nonstop. I mean, my parents we would get big 50-gallon drums of wheat from the government, and we would get big 5-gallon buckets of honey.
Did you ever have the government cheese?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. The only thing I think that we used to go to the grocery store, and we would tell the butcher we were getting meat for our dogs.
Yeah.
The scraps. But the butcher knew that we were eating it ourselves. And, he would, I think that he would throw in a couple of
good
choice pieces.
Yeah.
But we had, this is what I remember is we had all the milk we could drink because a farmer put his cows on our land. And so we would, have milk. And then we also had eggs because my dad, one of these patients would bring in 12 dozen eggs every week. With 14 kids, 16 people, that's only a dozen eggs a week per person.
Yeah, it goes pretty quick.
Yeah, but we would go in and we would get the produce to say we were giving it to the rabbits.
Yeah.
And we would get the scraps, say we were giving it to our dogs, and we would go and a lot of times we would eat some of that. Sometimes the people would give us.
Yeah.
But, my dad, and we've discussed this, my dad was a doctor in a very small town in Idaho. And, it's hard to pay the bills with 14 kids. And, up until I was probably 12 or 13, you know, that's my mom finally just said, no, I'm tired of living like this. I know you want to be a small town doctor, but until these kids get out of high school, you know, go get a job in the big city.
Right.
And that's, you know, what ended up happening. So, so as a provider, I haven't lived through it, but as a child, I did.
How much was that on your mind as a kid? I think that's, and I asked that question because I think sometimes a parent projects more feeling and emotion into something than the child actually feels.
I don't know that I really thought that much about it. I thought
Right.
that we had.
Your tummy was full. You had a whole place you could go play.
Let's not say our tummy was full.
Right. Okay.
Because when we come in, I mean, so again, 14 kids. It's like a zoo.
I see the cabinet just being like piranha attacking it. It's just like all that's left is like packaging.
Well, this is what it was. Is you would come in for dinner.
Yeah.
And, you know, you'd have bowls of food in the middle of the table and plates or whatever, you know, whatever you were eating. And we would all sit there and you would, you know, you said a prayer and the blessing and the food, and then you'd start grabbing. But the first thing you grabbed is because you can only take one portion.
Yeah.
And then you would sit there and you would realize what there was going to be leftovers for, and you would eat that first. So if there was only, you know, one piece of cornbread, you'd eat your soup before you got to cornbread because you'd get more soup. And I remember doing that a lot, but I don't know that we were ever overly stuffed. I mean, we had food, but
not stuffed. But
what it goes back to is
you weren't starving.
We weren't starving, but it goes back to the quality because we had to grind the flour. We had to take all of this, and we learned how to cook. We learned how to do all of that.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes we would just eat rabbit pellets. Not kidding. We never did.
You're not starving. You have a place to live. Your parents are probably thinking it'd be nice to give my kids more, but you're thinking, where am I going to go play next? What am I going to go do out in the canal? Like, what are we going to, you know, feeding the rabbits? Like, your minds are somewhere else. And I think that it's not to like discount that there are kids that are absolutely suffering. But I think sometimes we project as parents more emotion into what the child is feeling than the child's actually feeling. They're just in a different place. They have different concerns. They have different things that are.
I agree with that.
I remember we went camping this summer with some friends and we were commiserating about like things our parents made us do in high school. And their parent, his dad was funny. His dad went and bought a bunch of lawn equipment and said, "Hey, I'm helping you guys start a lawn care business." And so they went out and they found all the customers and they started mowing the lawns. And the dad took all the payments and then he would pay them $5 an hour. And they're like, "Wait a second, Dad, you're making more on this than we're making, and we're out there doing the work." He's like, I bought all the equipment. This is my business. You guys are my employees in it, right? And they were talking, and it was one story after the other about like how tough love their dad was. And then the wife came in and said, "You know what's really funny? Like all of the stuff that you're talking about that made you, and you're talking about how tough love made them successful because they're both quite successful." She's like, "All the stuff that you're saying that your dad did to you that you made you successful, you're shielding our children from," right? I was like, "Oh, that's interesting, right?" Like, anyway, so
what you're saying is I've got to tell my kids to get up there and cook their own damn breakfast.
Cook your own breakfast. Get to school yourself. I know. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. There's the relationship side of it. There's the survival support side of it. There's like the developmental side of it. Like there is a lot that goes into parenting, and I think that sometimes there's this worry that if we don't get it just right, our kids are not going to turn out. But I think that like it's shown us there's a million ways.
I just think most of the kids aren't going to turn out.
There's like a million ways. There's a million ways to parent that results in good kids, right? It's not just one size fits all. Going back to this, like, you know, coming up with a one size fits all solution. Like at the end of the day, it's like, you know, what do you want for your kid? And for me, I just want my kid to be a good, self-sufficient, empathetic, critical thinker, right? And if that's a doctor, if that's a school teacher, if that's a sanitation worker, honestly, I don't care what that looks like because what they are individually is not what they are for their job.
Make sure to tell your child when they're thinking about it that sanitation workers have saved more lives than any doctor ever has.
That it's great. All right, Nate, how do we parent?
With love.
With love. Tough love?
Tough love, soft love, whatever the child needs. And as a parent, you're supposed to be in tune with your children and their needs.
Develop a relationship with them.
Not a friendly relationship.
I think that's an important point.
Because, I don't want to be my daughter's best friend. I want to be her dad.
Yeah.
I don't want her mother to be her best friend. I want her to be her mother.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
So, and I don't want her friends to be some weird kid from down the street. Well, Shad, we missed a whole bunch of what we had written down to cover in the topics, but...
So should people read the Surgeon General's report?
I think it would be much more beneficial to go back and read the 2000 Surgeon General's report. I think it would be more important for the Surgeon General to actually get out and talk about these reports, all of them, because the Surgeon General has the bully pulpit. He's not the president. He's not anything big, but they do have a bully pulpit to go out and talk. And I think that the Surgeon General has really just not taken advantage of their role in being America's doctor, which is what the Surgeon General is supposed to be, and getting out there and playing a positive role. And I do think that there is mental health issues. I think a lot of those mental health issues are actually being pushed onto parents by the government, and the Surgeon General coming out and saying, well, hey, we have all of these mental health issues, well, duh.
Yeah.
Get the government out of parenting, and a lot of those mental health issues will go away. If the government would do its job and control inflation, if it would, keep an economy steady, keep us out of wars, keep us out of pandemics that we needlessly get into, then I think that a lot of those stresses would go away.
I mean, part of me thinks that puberty in and of itself is a mental illness, right? Like, you're completely rewiring the brain going through that stage. You're going from this process of me, individual survival to this idea of coexisting with others, and it requires the brain to totally rewire. And so you're going through this phase over several years where, you're thinking funny, or things, being the perception.
I didn't even realize they were thinking. So anyways, but that's another episode of Clear the Air. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was entertaining and you learned something. But we'll have some more.
Love your kids.
This episode was hosted by Nathan Jones, co-hosted by Shad Slaughter, produced by David Monk, associate producer Matthew Davis. Video and audio were edited by Caleb Scoresby, research by Saber Bills, graphics by Joseph Thornton, music by Augusto Diniz. If you enjoyed this episode of Clear the Air, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episode. Have a favorite episode? Share it with a friend or on social media. New episodes of Clear the Air are published weekly on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.